It's just past 7:30 p.m. across India. Live from New Delhi, you're watching DT India Global. We'll get you the top stories from India and the region. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh, and for news from the rest of the world, I'm joined by my colleague Benji Hire in Washington, DC. Good to have you with us, Benji.
Good morning, 10 a.m. here in Washington, D.C., 3 in the afternoon across Central Europe. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, Donald Trump convicted, history in the United States as the former president is found guilty in court. This as current President Joe Biden gives Ukraine permission to use US-provided arms in Russia. That's coming up after the headlines. First, back to you.
India's economic growth exceeds expectations, grows at 7.8% in the fourth quarter, 8.2% in the fiscal 2024. Ukrainian President Zelenskiy says Ukraine using Western weapons to strike Russian territory is only a matter of time. Kiev's allies divided over the issue. Donald Trump pronounced guilty in the hush money criminal trial, becomes the first former US president to be declared a convict, even as he runs for presidency again. The United States and Chinese defense chiefs lock horns on Taiwan in their first face-to-face meeting in 2 years, meet in Singapore on the sidelines of the Shangri-La dialogue. First, some positive news for India on the economic front. Exceeding expectations, India's gross domestic product or GDP for the fourth quarter of fiscal year 2023-24 grew at 7.8%. The full fiscal year real GDP growth provisionally stands at about 8.2%. The quarter 4 of financial year 23-24 GDP growth data was released by India's National Statistics Office on Friday. Moving on, Moscow has said its forces are advancing in all tactical directions in Ukraine and have taken control of 28 settlements this month. 3 people were killed, 16 others injured after a Russian missile destroyed a power facility and a power grid in Kiev on Friday. Regional governor said that S-300 missiles were used in the attacks that occurred at midnight local time. Meanwhile, Russian air defense systems destroyed a Ukrainian drone over the Tatstan region. 2 airports in Tatstan suspended operations for more than a couple of hours on Friday for safety reasons. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskiy on Friday signed a bilateral security agreement with Sweden, one of the 3 planned deals with Nordic countries, as he seeks more military support from the West in the conflict against Russia. And President Volodymyr Zelenskiy has said Ukraine using Western weapons to strike Russian territory, says, is only a matter of time.
That for today we have possibility to use these jets on the territory of Russia. We will see. We began to speak about it, and I said that I think that using any weapon, Western kind of weapon, on the territory of Russia, it's the question of time.
Self-defense is not escalation, NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg said on Friday amid a vivid political debate on whether or not Ukraine's military has the right to strike targets inside Russia with weapons supplied by the West. Speaking after a meeting of NATO states' foreign ministers in Prague, Stoltenberg said he was pleased to see some of Ukraine's Western allies lift the restrictions attached to weapons they supplied to Kiev.
War has evolved, NATO's support has evolved, and I welcome that allies are easing restrictions on the use of weapons. We need to remember what this is. This is a war of aggression. Russia has attacked Ukraine, and Ukraine has the right of self-defense.
And DD India's Megumi Lim joins us live from Kiev. Megumi, President Zelensky saying Ukraine using any Western weapon to strike Russian territory is only a matter of time. Is that a threat or a warning?
That's right. President Zelensky, as you said, has responded to this quite a major policy shift coming from Ukraine's top two actually weapons donors, the United States and Germany. Now, President Zelensky has said that it is a matter of time until these weapons are used to strike at Russian military targets inside Russian territory. Now, this is, I believe, not really a threat, but an act of self-defense for Ukraine, as we have been seeing Russian forces continue to mount assaults inside Ukraine's northeast Kharkiv region, both in civilian areas, but also on the front lines. President Zelensky has also been warning that Russian troops are massing on the border near the Sumy region, further up north in Ukraine, where he said there are thousands of Russian soldiers massing there. And so far, Ukrainian military officials have been saying that their hands have been tied. They can see a buildup of troops. They can see a buildup of Russian military equipment. So this lifting of restrictions is really for Kyiv an act of self-defense to be able to prevent future attacks from happening by Russian forces, by striking things like missile launchers, by striking military equipment that are responsible for these attacks, and also to prevent future possible ground incursions elsewhere in Ukraine.
But this issue of weapons use is not as simple as it looks. What do the visible divisions in the West regarding weapons policy mean for Ukraine's ongoing conflict?
Well, the ongoing concern and fear has been that Ukraine will use Western-supplied weapons to strike deeper inside Russian territory. That may lead to an escalation that may drag NATO countries, European countries into a war with Russia. These are some of the major concerns that Western allies had, which is why both the United States and Germany, which have now lifted some of their restrictions on their weapons, have made very, very clear that Ukraine is only allowed to use these weapons at a shorter range distance near the Kharkiv region, where Russian forces have been mounting their recent attacks and assaults. They've also been saying that the longer range weapons are still under the limits that have been put in place. Things like the US supplied long range ATACMS missiles that are able to fly as far as 300 kilometers. These are weapons that the United States have said that Ukraine is still not allowed to use inside Russian territory.
Megumi, thank you for those updates. Meanwhile, Germany on Friday announced that Ukrainian army can use weapons supplied by Berlin to defend itself against Russia's attacks. The German spokesperson said, under the international law, Ukraine has the right to defend itself against Russia's attacks. On the other hand, Italy has denied permission to Ukraine from using its weapons to attack targets in Russia as the country stands on bringing peace in the conflict. Meanwhile, Ukraine's key ally, United States, and principal adversary, Russia, present opposing views on Ukraine using Western weapons. And my colleague Benji Haya joins me from Washington, D.C., gives us more on this and other top stories. Benji, these divisions in the West over the weapons use policy seems to be making the matter complex.
Yes, this comes after Ukraine was authorized to strike targets in Russia using US-provided arms. President Joe Biden giving the go-ahead on Thursday. It's a marked policy shift from Washington that comes at a critical time in the conflict. Administration officials say the permission is granted, but limited to the area of Kharkiv in the northeast of the country, the scene of intense fighting amid a Russian advance across the border. The decision sees the United States follow the stance taken by some European allies that Ukraine should have the right to attack within Russia with Western weapons. Well, as you say, opposing views in Russia, where President Vladimir Putin warns this US decision could trigger a wider war. Moscow claims it's already aware of attempts made by Ukraine to strike Russian targets using US weapons. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov says while they don't know the details of President Biden's stance, this step shows how deeply Washington is involved in the conflict. DD India's Dasha Chernyshyova sends us this report from Moscow.
Well, indeed, Moscow regards these steps as the further escalation of the conflict in Ukraine. That does speak a lot about the further involvement of NATO countries into this conflict. The Russian officials, both the Russian president, his spokesman, as well as the foreign ministry, have been speaking over the past days, suggesting that it is impossible to use long-range, high-precision weapons that have been supplied to Ukraine without the satellites data from the Western countries. So that's why they say they know that these attacks have already been carried out with the support of those Western countries. But what they say is happening now is further escalation by those Western states that do want to inflict what Moscow says is a strategic defeat against Russia on the battlefield. In the meantime, the officials here insist that no matter if there is any permission or not, Russia will continue its operation and its course will not be deviated or one way or another altered because of that permission. So Moscow is quite certain that it is going to achieve the goals. In the meantime, saying that the result of such actions by the Western countries could be quite detrimental because it is undermining not just the global security, but also brings the world closer to the potential conflict between Russia and NATO countries.
The United States and the United Kingdom carried out airstrikes on Yemen's city of Hodeidah, killing 16 people and injuring dozens of others. Friday's strikes targeted a radio building in the Al Hawk district and the port of Salif. The US and UK military say they launched the strikes against the Houthi targets as part of efforts to deter the militant group from further disrupting the shipping in the Red Sea. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak insists this action was conducted in self-defence.
Last night, the RAF successfully conducted a fifth set of strikes against Houthi military targets in Yemen. Alongside the US, these strikes were conducted to further degrade the military capabilities of the Houthis and to prevent further attacks on international shipping. The strikes were taken in self-defence in the face of an ongoing threat that the Houthis pose.
History. Donald Trump has been found guilty in a New York court, becoming the first US president to be criminally convicted under federal law. After 2 days of deliberation in his hush money trial, one of 4 criminal trials he faces, a 12-member jury pronounced the former president guilty on all 34 charges of falsifying business records in order to cover up payments to a porn star in return for her silence about an affair. This was in the run-up to the 2016 presidential election, and Mr. Trump is running for the Oval Office again 8 years on. This conviction, though, won't constitutionally be able to stop his bid for the White House. The judge has set July 11th as the date of sentencing. That comes just days before the Republican Party officially chooses Mr. Trump as its nominee. He'll not be jailed in the meantime, but he could, whilst unlikely, face time behind bars once sentenced. Trump's team is expected to appeal the judgment. Well, Donald Trump is about to publicly address his conviction again. He's expressed outrage, calling the trial a scam and vowing to fight back. Take a listen.
This was a disgrace. This was a rigged trial by a conflicted judge who was corrupt. It's a rigged trial, a disgrace. They wouldn't give us a venue change. We were at 5% or 6%. In this district, in this area. This was a rigged, disgraceful trial. But the real verdict is going to be November 5th by the people. And they know what happened here, and everybody knows what happened here. I'm fighting for our country. I'm fighting for our Constitution. Our whole country is being rigged right now. This was done by the Biden administration in order to wound or hurt an opponent, a political opponent, and I think it's just a disgrace. And we'll keep fighting, we'll fight till the end and we'll win, because our country's gone to hell.
To South Africa, where the ruling African National Congress leads in the election with just under 60% of votes counted so far. However, the governing party is falling short of a majority. The ANC has won every election since the end of apartheid in 1994, when Nelson Mandela became the country's first black president. DD's Isaac Lakando reports from Johannesburg.
As results continue to trickle in here in South Africa, the one thing that is becoming increasingly apparent is the fact that South Africans are yearning for change. Over the last few days, we've had an opportunity to speak to a number of South Africans, and the one common theme there is the need for change. South Africans are calling for an end to the corruption, an end to the electricity shortages, an increase in service delivery, things like water, jobs. These are all things that South Africans have been telling us that they need. And so at this particular point, where the polls are showing that the ANC has less than 50% of the majority that it needs to be able to form a government, there's some hard questions that the ANC has to ask itself. And at this point, although we don't know yet, there could be some negotiations, some discussions around what type of coalition will have to be formed for the ANC to continue in power. On the 2nd of June, we expect full results to come out, but that will just be the beginning. From there, if a coalition is to be formed, some serious negotiations that could last a month or two have to be held. And from there, South Africans can begin to pick up the pieces and build the South Africa that they want. Isaac Lukando in Johannesburg, reporting for DD India.
Cancer patients in England are to begin being given access to trials of a new way of treating the disease, including with the use of vaccines. DD India's Ollie Barrett has more. He explains from London.
30 UK hospitals have so far signed up to the so-called cancer vaccine launch pad, and what that means is that initially hundreds of patients will have access to potential vaccines that will match with their particular type of cancer, mRNA vaccines of the type that is used in the COVID jabs around the world, to try and identify and destroy remaining cancer cells. In the phases initially of this trial, it will be mainly for patients who've had cancer treatment of another kind, chemotherapy or radiotherapy, and the vaccines will be matched up with those patients to try and hunt down any remaining cancer cells and destroy them using the body's immune system to get there and to do that. Now, this initial trial is not just going to be here in the UK. There will be other European countries involved as well, Germany and Belgium, for example. In this initial phase of the trial, due to run until about 2027, but over time it's thought that thousands of UK patients will end up being involved. Now, doctors stress that this isn't a silver bullet for cancer, but it is potentially a crucial weapon in the fight against cancer here in the UK, but also worldwide, and they're obviously therefore hopeful that the trial of this type of treatment will make a significant make a significant difference to patients in this country as well as beyond, if the results are as successful as doctors hope that they will be. There is a great deal of hope in the industry that this could be a major changing point when it comes to the way that you treat cancer worldwide. As I say, doctors initially saying that this isn't about doing away with chemotherapy or radiotherapy for now, but they do believe that it can quite rapidly, if the trials are successful, be a major weapon in the arsenal when it comes to fighting cancer worldwide. Ollie Barrett in London, reporting for DD India.
A ray of hope there from Ollie Barrett in London. That's it from me here in Washington. Wishing you a good weekend. Back to you in the studio.
You too, Benji. Thanks very much. And still to come on DD India Global. Seventh and final phase of India's parliamentary elections will take place on Saturday. Iran's former Speaker of Parliament, Ali Larijani, has registered for the country's upcoming presidential elections.
Wherever news breaks, whatever it takes.
Connecting corners, cutting across continents.
Stories that matter from across the globe.
Accurate, authentic journalism that serves you right. From politics to glamour, from sports to world affairs, with a fusion of aesthetics and substance. Introducing news in a new avatar. Experience the world through a new lens. Stay tuned to DD India for an exciting journey beyond borders.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Global. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh. Let's get you the latest on the world's largest democratic elections in India. The seventh and final phase of India's parliamentary elections will take place on Saturday, and with that, the world's largest democratic elections will draw to a close. Voters across 57 constituencies in 8 states and union territories are eligible to exercise their franchise. All 13 seats of the state of Punjab, 4 of Himachal Pradesh, 13 constituencies of Uttar Pradesh, 9 in West Bengal, 8 in Bihar, 6 in Odisha and 3 seats in Jharkhand, besides the union territory of Chandigarh, will go to the polls on Saturday. Let's take a look at poll preparations in India's northwestern state of Punjab, which is also scheduled to go in the polls in the final leg of the elections on June 1st. DD India's Amritpal Singh gets us more.
Preparations for polling on Saturday on all 13 Lok Sabha seats for Punjab has been completed. As you can see behind me, polling parties are moving from distribution centres like this to the polling stations. There are about 24,450 polling stations all across the state of Punjab, of which over 6,000 are said to be critical. Given that it's a border state, BSF is patrolling the border along with Pakistan to see that influx of drugs is stopped or considerably lessened. There are about 70,000 security personnel, including the state police and central forces, which have been deployed across the state so that polling can be conducted peacefully tomorrow. The last time around, there was about 66% polling in Punjab, but given the heat, the general perception is that the polling figures could come down, though the Election Commission is leaving no stone unturned to see that the polling surpasses the last time's polling percentage. For people, the issues that really matter are drugs, the drug menace in Punjab, for youth employment, for women, their security, and of course the agrarian distress and the agrarian crisis, which looms large and is a big poll issue in these elections. With cameraman Manmohan Singh, this is Amritpal Singh for DD India in Punjab.
Meanwhile, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has taken time off for meditation at the iconic Vivekananda Rock Memorial in the southern tip of the nation. Upon his arrival at Kanyakumari on Thursday, a local time, Prime Minister first offered prayers at the Bhagwati Amman temple before heading to Vivekananda Rock Memorial. Let's now turn to other stories making news around the world. A Russian court on Friday extended the pre-trial detention of journalist Alsu Komasheva, who holds Russian and United States citizenships, until August 5. Komasheva is Prague-based journalist for Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, detained by Russia as a foreign agent. German police on Friday said they shot and injured a man armed with a knife who attacked a right-wing demonstration in the southwestern city of Mannheim. 2 tornadoes roared through outskirts of Midland, Texas, the latest in the month of severe weather in the central United States. The National Weather Service has issued a storm warning and advised residents to seek shelter. Spain police has seized forged merchandise and other items worth $6.5 million for sale ahead of Champions League finals and the European Championship scheduled in Germany next month. The seized goods include fake shirts and other forged items such as luxury watches, leather goods and electronics. The US and Chinese defense chiefs locked horns on Taiwan in their first face-to-face meetings in 2 years on Friday. US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, China's Defense Minister Dong Yun met in Singapore on the sidelines of Asia's premier defense summit, the Shangri-La Dialogue. During the meeting, Austin expressed concern about Chinese military activity near Taiwan, including after the island's presidential elections. Iran's former Speaker of Parliament, Ali Larijani, has registered for the country's upcoming presidential elections on Friday, following the death of President Ibrahim Raisi in a helicopter crash. The 5-day registration period will close on Tuesday. The Guardian Council is then expected to issue its final list of candidates within 10 days. Humans and robots united at AI for Good Summit in Geneva. The annual AI for Good Global Summit brings together leading experts in the field to tackle some of the world's most pressing issues, from emerging AI applications to governance and ethical considerations. That's all for this edition of DD India Live. Let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan this QR code on your screens to download now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India Global. Namaskar.